city. So, if you remember back in chapter 4, that other letter was written to King Artaxerxes, and I think that was probably Cambyses, who succeeded Cyrus. And sometimes successors want to undo, what their predecessors had done, or which were not exactly do the same things the predecessors had done. So that could be part of the issue as well. Don't know all those things. But in any case, now you have Darius as king of Persia, and it is now the second year of his reign, and work is now rebegun on the temple. All right. So, in the contents of the letter, first of all, the governor, Tatnai, informs Darius that the temple is being rebuilt. Notice with heavy stones, timber, and they're being very diligent about this. They really did listen to the message of God through the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, and they got to work. So the elders then gave them an explanation as to why it is that they were working on this. First of all, they gave credit to the Lord. We are the servants of God of heaven and earth, verse 11 says. And that's what He wants us to do. He wants us to rebuild this temple. But then also, they explained that not only is that the case, but that why it was destroyed originally. It was destroyed because they were disobedient to God. And so because of that Nebuchadnezzar came and he destroyed the temple. But now, they are working under the authorization of Cyrus, and Darius must have been on better terms with Cyrus than Cambyses was, because it doesn't seem to bother him that Cyrus issued this decree. When he finds it, he seems pretty eager, as we're going to see in chapter 6, to ensure that the work continues. So they make reference to the fact that Cyrus decreed them to rebuild that temple. What he did in order to authorize that, which includes the restoration of the gold and the bronze and the silver and everything that was taken from the temple, and to restore that to the city of Jerusalem. All right. Any questions or comments about chapter 5? So looking at our handout questions, what was significant about Haggai and Zechariah's prophecies? And as you see, it was those prophecies that re-engaged the children of Israel to work on rebuilding the temple. So because of the prophecies that they prophesied, they began rebuilding the temple. And who was Tatnai, and what did he do? Question number 2. He was the local governor, and he spoke with the elders, and they explained their situation to him, and he relayed that very faithfully to Darius. And verse 4 said, question number 4, why did they not cause them to cease building? And the answer there is in verse 5. But the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews. So somehow God made a favorable circumstance to that, taking care of the elders of the Jews there when they interacted with Tatnai. So that became a good thing. And then question number 6, what was his advice to Darius? And that is in verse 17. His advice was, make a search of the king's treasure house in Babylon and find out whether or not that decree was issued. So check the records, in other words. Which is good advice. if somebody says, so-and-so did this right here, and we have records about that, then it's a good idea to go back and check the records to see if they're telling the truth, right? Which is something that did not happen in the previous letter we had in chapter 4, and it kind of shows the disingenuousness of the people who were writing that particular letter, because if they had been honest about it, they would have known that they had a decree from Cyrus to do this building. All right. Well, any other questions? All right. Well, let's look at chapter 6 then. Take a look at that. All right. So, chapter 6, verse 1. Then King Darius issued a decree, and a search was made in the archives, where the treasures were stored in Babylon. So, Darius is a good king. He's going to follow the advice of his governors, and the governor suggested that he search the archives, so he says, okay, let's search the archives. And so, here's the details of that. Verse 2, and at Mecca, in the palace that is in the province of Media, a scroll was found, and in it a record was written thus. So here's the record that was written. Here it is, verse 3. In the first year of King Cyrus issued a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be rebuilt, the place where they offered sacrifices, and let the foundations of it be firmly laid, its height 60 cubits, and its width 60 cubits, with 3 rows of heavy stones, and 1 row of new timber. Let the expenses be paid from the king's treasury. Also, let the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple, which is in Jerusalem, and brought to Babylon, be restored and taken back to the temple which is in Jerusalem, each to its place, and deposit them in the house of God. And that seems to be the record. Now, verse 6, he's addressing Tattenai directly in this letter. So, this is a continuation of the letter here. So, now therefore, Tattenai, governor of the region beyond the river, and Shethar-Boznai, and your companions the Persians who are beyond the river, keep yourselves far from there. Let the work of this house of God alone, let the governor of the Jews and let the work of this house of God alone. In other words, don't interrupt it. Leave it alone, right? Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews build this house of God on its site. Moreover, I issue a decree as to what you shall do for the elders of these Jews, the building of this house of God. Let the cost be paid at the king's expense from taxes on the region beyond the river. This is to be given immediately to these men, so that they are not hindered. Whatever they need, young bulls, rams, and lambs for burnt offerings to God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, and oil, according to the request of the priests who are in Jerusalem, let it be given them day by day without fail, that they may offer sacrifices and sweet aroma to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the king and his sons. Also, I issue a decree that whoever alters this edict, let a timber be pulled from his house and erected, and let him be hanged on. And let his house be made a refuse because of this. And may the God who causes his name to dwell there destroy any kind of people who put their hand to alter it, or to destroy this house of God which is in Jerusalem. I, Darius, issue a decree, let it be done diligently. Alright. So we have in verses 3 through 5 the record, and then verses 6 through 12 we have the letter. So Darius is very sympathetic. He is wanting to support the effort to rebuild the temple. And so that's what the letter instructs Adonai to do. And so this support is going to be given from the king's resources. The king's treasury is going to support it. And it even says, and if they need anything else, offerings for their sacrifices, those kinds of things, supply those as well. Make sure that the work gets done and that the temple is built. And then there's a punishment associated with verse 11 with those who would oppose the work or who would hinder the work. And it's a pretty severe punishment. I mean, this is not messing around. You take a timber out of their house and you hang them on that timber and then let the house cave in. That's quite a punishment associated with it. Of course, this is a dictator. He's a dictator, and he's wanting his law to be followed, and those who are going to oppose it, he's not going to have a lot of sympathy for them. Well, that ensures that the work is going to be completed so that there are no more interruptions. And you can be sure that God was orchestrating things behind the scenes here to bring about this particular result. God had promised that this temple would be rebuilt, and it was going to be rebuilt. And so those who oppose God will find themselves in a situation where they're not going to have a lot of support. Any questions or comments about the letter? Yeah, that's a good point. It indicates attitude change from the previous ruler. And evidently, he wasn't very concerned about that. But here, Darius seems to be interested in listening to the prayers of the people in Jerusalem. I don't know if that is, as far as Darius was not a Jew, he was a heathen man. And so it could have just been a general kind of thought on this one. He'd take all the prayers that he could get from all the gods that he could get. May have been what kind of how he thought about this. Could be. On the other hand, he could have been influenced by Daniel or one of those guys who ended up, high up in the administration of Persia after Babylon fell. And Daniel, of course, was a very influential person. Could have been involved in it. Daniel had some say in some of these matters. We don't know all the details. There were several pilgrimages back to Jerusalem. There was the initial one that we read about at the beginning of Ezra, and then there's going to be a second pilgrimage that Ezra is part of, because he doesn't come until later. And all of the things that are being written here in chapters 1 through 6, they're being recorded, but they have just kind of been lumped into this particular memory. Chapter 7 through 10 is a kind of a separate book in a lot of ways, because it's a different time period, and it concerns a different subject matter as well. So, Yes, Ezra was a very spiritually minded man, and one of my favorite verses here in Ezra 7 and verse 10, where Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach statutes and ordinances in Israel. So yes, he was very instrumental in reorganizing the people of Israel so that they were focused in on doing what the Lord wanted them to do. Yes, yes. So Ezra's work created a tremendous impetus to bring them into the period that we know as the New Testament period. But his work was very important. All right. Any other thoughts, comments? And if it sounds like I'm repeating what he's saying, I am for the benefit of those who are listening online and recording and other things. I was listening to the recording the other day, and you can't hear what anybody's saying when you're watching online. So I'm trying to help out. I know Weaver's probably watching. All right. Any other thoughts? All right. Well, let's finish out the chapter then, verses 13 through 32. So we have the dedication of the temple, and then we're going to see the celebration of Passover. Verse 13. Then Tattenai, the governor of the region beyond the river, Shethar Boznai, and their companions diligently did according to what King Darius had sent. So the elders of the Jews built, and they prospered with the prophesying of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah, the son of Nineveh. And they built and finished it according to the command of the God of Israel, and according to the command of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. Now the temple was finished on the third day of the month of Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius. So in the 6th year, my math here, Darius began in 518 is what I got. So I guess it'd be 512, is that right? 1896, is that 12? What is it? Somebody will do it. Yeah, it's 12. Well, you're an Aggie, aren't you? Tell me the answer. Oh, I think it's 12. 512 BC. So anyway, y'all just gonna let me hang out here dry. Appreciate that. We're going with 512. So about 512. I know I said 515 earlier, but some in that time frame. So it's pretty close to that time. All right. Sometimes these dates, they're kind of hard to know for sure exactly when these things took place. Sometimes they say 515, maybe 512, something like that. All right. So this was the 6th year of Darius. Okay? And here's what it says here. Alright, verse 16. Then the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites and the rest of the descendants of the captivity celebrated the dedication of this house of God with good. And they offered sacrifices at the dedication of this house of God, 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats, according to the number of the tribes of Israel. They assigned the priests to their divisions and the Levites to their divisions over the service of God in Jerusalem, as it is written in the book of Moses. Once again, we have a reference to the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, the Law of Moses, and That was the pattern that they were following to rebuild the temple and to restart the sacrifices. With that pattern, they were then able to do exactly what God wanted them to do. Today, we follow the pattern that we find in the New Testament. We can do what God wants us to do as well. So notice the number of sacrifices here. 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs. How many sacrifices were offered at the beginning of Solomon's temple? Does anybody remember? I remember right, it was thousands. It was a lot more than this. But they were offering sacrifices to a lot more people as well in the time of Solomon. So, First Kings is where we find the story of Solomon building the temple. And say again? 144,000. Yeah. So, a lot more. But anyway. So think about all the blood that would come off of this temple as a result of these sacrifices. And that's a detail that we don't want to leave out because that blood represented the price that had to be paid, right, for the sins of Israel. And so this was the price when they made these sacrifices. Yeah. I'm going to be charitable to my Aggie friends over here. That's okay. So a lot of sacrifices. There will be a lot of blood from these sacrifices as well. So now verses 19 and following, and the descendants of the captivity kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. The priests and the Levites had purified themselves. All of them were ritually clean, and they slaughtered the Passover lambs for all the descendants of the captivity, for their brethren the priests, and for themselves. Then the children of Israel who had returned from the captivity ate together with all who had separated themselves from the filth of the nations of the land in order to seek the Lord God of Israel. They kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days with joy. The Lord made them joyful and turned the heart of the king of Assyria toward them to strengthen their hands to work in the house of God, the God of Israel. All right. So we have very good, positive results that occur because of their turning back to rebuild the temple. The temple, sacrifices, recommits here. The temple is dedicated. God is now being worshipped as He has commanded them to worship Him. They celebrate the Passover, and there's a wonderful feast that they all enjoy together. The feast of the Passover lamb. All right. Any questions or comments about any of that? Yes. Yes. That's correct. That Ezra didn't come back until somewhere around, let's say, 450 BC. These things are taking place, roughly 515, 512, somewhere there. But then Ezra comes back 450, somewhere there. So it's 67 years. just to reiterate Ray's comment, the concept of time is something that we have to take into consideration when we're reading through these chapters. Specifically, that there is a large period of time between chapter 6 and 7, about 7 years, and also, there's a period of time between chapters 5 and 6, and between 4 and 5. So, all of these events in chapters 1 through 6 are taking place. We start about 539 BC and maybe end around 512 BC, somewhere there. So we're talking a period of, we have to do the math here, 30, 40 years, something like that. 30 years maybe. So a little bit less than that, maybe 25. So that's the period of time we're talking about. 25 years is a pretty good stretch of time, right? But sometimes that's how long it takes in order to accomplish what God wants us to do, especially in some of these bigger things that God has us to focus on sometimes. And it takes effort, it takes sacrifice, it takes focus, determination, it takes dealing with issues. And that's one of the great lessons of the book of Ezra, is that you've got to deal with the issues that come up when they come up. You've got to work through those things. You can't give up. You've got to keep on keeping on. And I wonder how many people thought, well, we're just never going to get the temple during this time. Probably quite a few. And then Haggai and Zechariah come along and they're prophesying and saying, hey guys, this is the thing. Come on, we can do it. So sometimes it takes people coming in to help us, to get us back on track. And that's a good thing. Alright, so just real quickly, the questions here. What did Darius do regarding the letter? Well, he did exactly what Tattenai recommended. He searched the archives, found the record, and he told Tattenai to go ahead and let them continue to rebuild the temple. So, what evidence was found to inform Darius' decision? The old records of Cyrus' name were found. And what did Darius order Tattenai to do? Leave them alone. Let them continue work and even supply of gold and silver and animals for sacrifice for the king's treasury. Punishment for those who would oppose it. When did they complete the work on the temple? And it says there that they completed the work on the temple on the third day of the month of Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. And what did they do at its completion? They offered sacrifices, and what was celebrated? The Passover. All right, we will pick up with chapter 8 and 9 next week. I'm trying to get done with Ezra before I kick off. The feast of unleavened bread, Passover, Yes, they are the same thing.